Rain hammered the deserted road as his headlights caught something. Two tiny figures standing barefoot in the storm. They didn't move, didn't even flinch. Just stood there, soaked to the bone, holding each other like the world had ended. Jack Lawson slammed the brakes, jumped out, and shouted over the rain, "Hey, where are your parents?" The older girl, maybe 7, raised a trembling hand and pointed into the dark woods. "Our mom," she whispered. "She's in there." And right then, Jack knew this wasn't just another storm. Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit subscribe for more videos like this. Let's begin. The wipers struggled against the rain, screeching across the windshield as Jack Lawson leaned forward, squinting through the blur of water and lightning. He was just trying to get home after a 14-hour shift at the garage, coffee gone cold, back aching, and thoughts heavy. But when those two small shapes appeared on the road, barefoot, shivering, clutching each other like their lives depended on it, exhaustion vanished. He threw his truck into park, slammed the door, and ran toward them. The rain hit like ice. "Hey, what are you doing out here?" he shouted over the storm. The older girl, about 7, pulled her little sister closer. Both had tangled blonde hair plastered to their faces, soaked dresses clinging to their knees. The younger one looked no older than 5. Her lips were blue. Jack knelt beside them, voice soft but urgent. "It's okay. You're safe now. Where's your mom?" The older girl pointed toward the dark woods. She crashed the car. She didn't wake up." Jack's stomach dropped. He glanced toward the trees. The rain was coming down in sheets, the night thick and endless. "Stay here," he said firmly, shrugging off his flannel and wrapping it around their shoulders. "Don't move until I come back. Understand?" The little one nodded weakly, clutching the fabric like it was armor. Jack grabbed his flashlight from the truck and ran toward the woods, his boots sinking into mud. Branches whipped his face as he pushed through, scanning for any sign of a vehicle. Then, through the blur of rain and lightning, there it was. A crumpled sedan, half buried in brush, its headlights flickering dimly. Steam hissed from the hood. "Ma'am," Jack shouted, yanking at the door. It was jammed. He braced his shoulder and slammed it open. Inside, a woman lay slumped against the steering wheel, blood trickling from her forehead. Her breathing, faint but steady. "Hang on," he muttered, reaching across to check her pulse. Alive. Barely. He spotted a locket around her neck, gold, heart-shaped, engraved with the word hope. That one word hit him hard. He'd lost plenty of things in life, but hope wasn't one of them. "All right, Hope," he murmured under his breath. "Let's get you out of here." He lifted her carefully, muscles straining. The rain soaked them both, turning the path back to the road into a slick mess. But step by step, he pushed through, his jaw clenched, breath ragged. The girls saw him first. Nora squealed and ran forward, her bare feet splashing through puddles. "Mama." "She's okay," Jack called out, though his voice trembled. He wasn't sure if she was. He laid her gently across the back seat of his truck and turned the heat on, full blast. "We're going to the nearest hospital, okay? Stay buckled." Lila's tiny hand caught his sleeve. "Please don't let her die." He looked into those wide, scared eyes and nodded. "I won't." The truck roared to life, tires throwing water as it sped down the road. The woman stirred slightly, a low groan escaping her lips. Jack adjusted the mirror, watching her reflection between flashes of lightning. "Hang in there, lady," he whispered. "Your girls need you." When they reached the small town hospital, the storm was at its worst. Jack carried her inside, soaked to the bone, mud on his jeans, trembling from adrenaline. Nurses rushed over, taking the woman from his arms. "Name?" one asked. Jack shook his head. "Don't know. Found her and the kids by the road." As the doors swung shut behind the gurney, Jack turned to the twins. They stood together in the hallway, holding hands, eyes too old for their age. He grabbed a towel from the counter and crouched down, drying their hair. "You did good," he said softly. "You got help. That's what heroes do." Lila looked at him with a flicker of something that broke him a little. Trust. "Will you stay until she wakes up?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I'll be right here." Outside, thunder rolled, and the storm kept raging. But for the first time that night, Jack didn't feel alone. By the time the storm eased, the hospital's hallways had gone quiet. Just the hum of fluorescent lights and the faint rhythm of rain tapping the windows. Jack sat in the waiting area with a paper cup of cold coffee, watching the twins sleep curled up together on the worn-out bench. He'd promised them he'd stay, and he meant it. A nurse finally approached. "She's stable," she said, offering a faint smile. "Minor concussion, a few bruises. She's lucky you found her when you did. Another hour out there and—" Jack exhaled slowly, the tension finally leaving his shoulders. "Can I see her?" "Just for a few minutes," the nurse said. "But she's asking about her kids." He looked down at the sleeping girls, then nodded. "They'll want to see her too." Inside the dim hospital room, the woman stirred under white sheets. Her blonde hair, now clean and brushed, fell over her shoulders. When Jack stepped in, her blue eyes flicked open, dazed but searching. "You were in an accident," he said gently. "I'm Jack. I found you and your girls on the highway." Her brow furrowed, memory flashing across her face. "The crash. Lila and Nora?" "They're safe," he said quickly. "They've been right here the whole time." The door opened again, and the twins ran in. The woman gasped softly as they threw themselves onto her, sobbing into her chest. Jack turned away to give them space, but their reunion hit something deep in him, the kind of ache only a parent could understand. When he finally stepped forward again, the woman looked at him, voice shaky. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to," he said simply. "Just get better." She gave a weak smile. "I'm Claire." "Claire," he repeated, nodding. "Nice to meet you properly." A few hours later, once the doctor cleared her for release, Jack offered to drive them home. But Claire hesitated when he asked for her address, her hands tightening on the blanket. "We don't really have one right now," she admitted. "I was driving to my mother's, but she passed last winter." Her voice cracked on the last word. Jack glanced at the twins sitting quietly beside her, then made a decision before she could finish. "You can stay at my place for the night. It's dry, warm, and I've got pancakes in the morning that could probably win awards." Claire blinked. "I can't impose like that." "Not imposing," he said softly. "You'd do the same if it were my kid out there." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded, eyes glistening. "Okay." Jack's farmhouse was small but cozy, the kind of place that always smelled faintly of pine and coffee. The porch light flickered as they stepped inside, and Claire whispered a small, shaky laugh. "It's charming," she said, her voice still tired but softer now. Translation: old and falling apart, Jack said with a grin. "But it's home." He handed the twins oversized t-shirts to sleep in, and they giggled as they disappeared into the guest room. Claire leaned against the counter, watching him pour hot chocolate into chipped mugs. "You're a mechanic?" she asked. "Yeah," Been running the town's only garage for a few years now. Keeps me busy, keeps the lights on. She looked around the little house. Photos on the wall, a tiny painting of a girl's handprint framed by the door. You live here alone? Jack hesitated, his jaw tightening. Used to be 3 of us, he said quietly. My daughter Lily. She passed a few years ago. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy, real, human. Claire's eyes softened. I'm so sorry. He shrugged slightly, forcing a smile. You learn to keep going. Nights like this remind me why. When the twins were asleep, Jack brought out a blanket for Claire and nodded toward the couch. It's not the Ritz, but it's warm. She smiled faintly. You've already done more than enough, Jack. He paused at the doorway, looking back. Just glad I was there when you needed someone. Outside, the last of the rain dripped from the eaves, and for the first time in a long time, Jack felt a quiet sense of peace settle in. Maybe the storm had brought more than trouble. It had brought purpose back into his life. And in the other room, as Claire whispered a prayer of thanks and held her daughters close, she couldn't help but think the same thing. Sunlight slipped through the curtains, soft and golden, painting warm streaks across the worn wooden floor. The storm was gone, leaving the air smelling like wet earth and fresh beginnings. Jack stood at the stove, flipping pancakes as the smell of butter filled the small kitchen. For the first time in months, he caught himself humming, quiet, almost forgotten. Footsteps padded behind him. That smells amazing, Claire said, her voice raspy but kind. She wore one of his old flannel shirts that hung loosely over her frame, sleeves rolled up, hair tied back. For someone who'd survived a car crash less than 12 hours ago, she somehow managed to smile. Coffee's there, he said, nodding toward the counter. It's not fancy, but it'll wake you up. She smiled softly. You're full of surprises, Jack. He glanced at her, one eyebrow raised. You say that like it's a bad thing. Before she could respond, 2 small pairs of feet thundered in. The twins climbed onto the chairs, laughter bubbling out like sunlight itself. Can we have chocolate chips in ours? Nora asked, eyes bright. Jack grinned. You're lucky. It's the only kind I make. Claire covered her mouth, then laughing quietly. The sound, light, unguarded, filled the room in a way that made it feel alive again. They ate together around the old table. Lila leaned over her plate. Mom says we used to make pancakes on Sundays, she said softly. But we stopped when she had to work all the time. Claire's hand froze around her fork. Her eyes dropped. Jack caught it, the flicker of guilt that crossed her face. Work's important, he said gently, breaking the tension. But not more than mornings like this. Claire looked at him, something unreadable in her eyes. You sound like someone who learned that the hard way. Jack gave a small, tired smile. Yeah, I did. After breakfast, the twins ran outside to chase the chickens behind the barn, their laughter echoing through the crisp air. Claire stood by the window, watching them, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug. I don't even know how to repay you, she said quietly. If you hadn't stopped. Don't, Jack interrupted softly. You don't owe me anything. She turned toward him. People don't just stop in the middle of a storm for strangers. Not anymore. Jack shrugged. Maybe that's why we should. There was a long pause, one that carried weight. You said your daughter's name was Lily, Claire murmured. She must have been special. She was, he said, voice roughening. Kindest kid you'd ever meet. The kind who'd give her shoes away just because someone else's feet looked colder. He laughed under his breath. Guess I learned that kind of kindness doesn't die when the person does. Claire swallowed hard, her eyes glistening. You sound like someone she'd be proud of. He didn't answer, just nodded. Outside, the twins screamed in delight as one of the hens chased them across the yard. Claire smiled through her tears. You should stay here a few days, Jack said suddenly. At least until you figure out your next move. It's not much, but it's safe. Claire hesitated, torn between pride and exhaustion. Jack, you've already done too much. He cut her off again, gently but firm. You and your girls deserve a break. Let me do this. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she nodded, voice barely a whisper. Okay. That evening, after the twins fell asleep, Claire stepped out onto the porch. The sky was painted in shades of violet and gold, the field stretching endlessly under the fading light. Jack was already there, fixing the flickering porch bulb that had burned out again. You fix everything yourself? She asked softly. He smirked. Try to. Some things you can't, though. She leaned against the railing. Like what? He paused, the wrench still in his hand. Regret? Time. People you couldn't save. The words hung heavy in the air. Claire looked down at her hands. I know that feeling too well, she whispered. Jack turned toward her, curiosity flickering in his eyes. I wasn't driving home from work last night, she admitted. I was driving away from a man who hurt us. Her voice trembled, but she didn't cry. I thought if I could just get my girls somewhere safe, it would all finally stop. Jack set the wrench aside and stepped closer, his voice steady but kind. You don't have to run anymore, not while you're here. Her eyes met his, full of exhaustion and fragile hope. Why are you being so kind to us, Jack? He gave her a small, sad smile. Because someone once was kind to me when I didn't deserve it. Guess I'm just paying it forward. For a long moment, they stood in silence, the wind carrying the scent of wet pine and peace. And as the porch light finally flickered to life, steady, glowing, warm, Claire realized that sometimes storms don't destroy lives. They introduce you to the people who can help you rebuild them.